Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Omnisports NBA podcast. I'm here with Rashi, and today we are going to be listing our each individually our top 5 teams post trade deadline. The trade deadline is an important time in the NBA season, and it kind of falls around the All-Star break. So this is really a time where like the picture starts crystallizing and lots of trades happened. We will try to talk about all of them, but we're going to start with our teams. So, Rashi, anything you want to say before we dive into this week's episode?
I am really excited to get started. I'm really interested to see what Bobby's ranking is because we actually haven't discussed it yet. So, with that, I'll let Bobby take it away.
Yeah, so this is purely, we don't know. We're going to find out live. So if you see confused or concerned facial reactions, they're genuine. So I'm going to go through my 5, and Rashi will go through hers, and we'll see where we overlap and disagree. So I'm going to talk about just a couple honorable mentions or teams who'd be like, oh, I'd expect you to talk about that, Bobby. So first, being a Lakers fan, I'm sure everyone's like, you're going to talk about the Lakers, right? No, they're not my top 5. I do think that, and like Lakers fans, I am watching this during Luka's first game, so I'm dedicated to the art of podcasting. I'm not watching it. I watched a few minutes before, but they don't have a center. Jackson Hayes can't be your guy. We'll talk about later the Mark Williams, whatever that fiasco is, but they're not there for me. The Mavs, prior to AD getting hurt, looked really good. AD looked like a beast, which Rashi sent me on Instagram, like, oh my god, he's playing out of his mind, and I was watching the game too, and then of course he gets hurt, and you're like, ugh. Is this karma for the Mavs? I don't know, but AD doesn't deserve it. That's all I know from the situation. But there are lots of good teams. This list was tough for me, Rashi, because I mentioned to you before, in terms of just making the list, I feel like for me there's a clear top 3, maybe a top 4, and then like 4 or 5 through like 10 to 12, I felt like there are a lot of teams I could place in this kind of like, I could see you being in the second round, but the way I was thinking a lot of this is like, who's going to do well in the playoffs? And so some of these picks you might be like, oh, that's not like, right now they're not killing it. I'm like, I know, but in a playoff series, do we want to face this team? So that's kind of where my mindset was. So number 5 for me is the Rockets. And so the Rockets, they're young, and they are really defensively focused. They're slumping a little bit right now, but that's mostly because Fred VanVleet is not in right now. And I think even though he's not, the point guard he once was, he's still an important veteran presence in a really young team. Sengun, the first half against Anthony Davis, was getting dog walked. But then the second half, the Rockets looked much better against the Mavericks. But I think the Rockets got a lot of cool things going for them. Ime Udoka, I don't necessarily love him as a human being because of some scandals pertaining to him. But as a coach, he built the infrastructure that the Celtics are now, right? The Celtics coach, he's great, but this group really started under Ime. Ime. I'm so sorry I'm saying your name wrong, probably. But I just think the Rockets are good, but I think the issue with them is they're young. And so I don't think it's their year this year, but they play with a lot of passion and spirit. Rashi, any thoughts on my number 5?
Yeah, that was, I agree. Well, I'm now giving it away. That's not in my top 5, but mainly because they're slumping right now, and maybe that is, and you are right, it's because of an injury. But I do think right there is a lot of potential for the future, and I think it's an underrated pick in that a lot of people forget that the Rockets were pretty much number 2, 3 for most of the season on the West. Mm-hmm. The West is very competitive, of course, and so I agree. I think that they have the right pieces. I also agree that the youth is probably more overwhelming on the Rockets than it is almost on any other, well, not almost on any other team, but any contending team. And so I think you're right. They'll make it somewhere, but they will make it further in the future.
Yeah, so that's how I feel. The Rockets excite me as a spicy surprise pick, but I don't. Honorable mention team that makes me feel like the Rockets are the Magic. They're not my top 5, just putting that out there. But the Magic feel similar. Young team, good defense. Lots of high motor players who are playing in a good system. Number 4, I went back and forth on this because I was like, they're not how they've been in the past. But when your best player, who in my opinion is the best player in the world, is having his best season, and Nikola Jokic, it's hard to not have the Nuggets here. So the Nuggets are my 4. The reason they're not higher is because of the supporting supporting cast around Nikola. Braun has really stepped up his game. Christian Braun, little guy. He's just a little guy, but he's not that little. I'm sure he would tower over me. But he's really good. But I feel like the problem is everyone else around the Nuggets are what they were 2 years ago, but just older. I do think Murray, he does this weird thing where he's kind of not as good in the regular season as you expect, but then he's like so good usually in the playoffs. So I think this pick could be higher if I trusted Murray to for sure turn out in the playoffs, but I don't know if he will. But I mean, Jokic is like shooting, he's shooting from three percentages you'd expect from an elite 3-point. And he's now shooting with volume. It's just like, what is this guy doing? He is so unfathomably good. It's like, it makes me mad. It's just like, because like it's so easy for him. It's just watching a savant. It's like watching a virtuoso compose like live or something. You're just like, what is happening? So Rashi, what do you think about the number 4 pick?
I agree with that. I do think that Jokic is going crazy. I just saw a clip where he drained 3, which is insane for someone his size, and this is not unusual, but it's just like these insane shots that he's taking. I also agree. I often question what the Denver management is doing, because one, if Luka was on the market, like why didn't Denver trade for him? Because I would have loved to see that. Like I would have loved to see Luka.
And that's probably the one trade destination where people are happy for Luka. You're like, oh, you get to be with your boy Jokic, and like
exactly.
they like. But no.
It's like a fun narrative. I don't know what the Nuggets would have given. Maybe Braun, Murray, I don't know. But
You'd have to.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe it's like a multi-team trade. I don't know. But anyways, my point is that I don't know what the Nuggets are doing in terms of like they made very few moves at the trade deadline, and they often make very few moves. And I think this like trying to focus the team around Jokic is a good idea, but I think there's a difference between focusing a team around someone and that person being the team. Because Jamal Murray steps up, like other people do step up here and there, but I just don't think that it's enough to like push them over. I'm sure the teams that we both listed in our top 3.
Yeah. So my number 3, and this isn't a Laker hater pick because people might say it should be higher, but it's the Celtics. So the Celtics, they're just everything they do is really good. Like they're just a well-rounded team. They don't have a weak piece. They're like their bench unit is like it's a very deep team. Their bench unit's really good. Like you'll get randomly great performances from is that Sam Merrill like doing good? Sam's on the on the Cavs. But like you'll get players like that. Sam Hauser's who's I'm thinking of. You're just like, what? Why did you make all those threes? Like how did that happen? I think the Celtics though for me, and the reason they're not higher is I feel like last year they dotted every I and they crossed every T in every game, and I'm not feeling it the same way. Even when I watch like the Celtics games I have watched, and like of course I'm watching with a hateful eye because I'm a hater, but they're not like last year I was mad at the Celtics for how good they're playing because I hate them, and I don't feel the same like frustration towards them, which tells me that they're not totally there. I don't know if it's just it's hard to do multiple deep playoff runs. It's really tiring, mentally exhausting. I can't speak to everything. I think Jaylen Brown hasn't been as good as he normally has been. Tatum, which is really good, top 10 player in the league, but closer to the 10 than to the 1. And overall, I think I think they're a good team. They're well coached. They could do very well in the playoffs, but I could also easily see them doing something really boneheaded in the clutch. And I feel like I've seen more of that this year, whereas last year I feel like I didn't see that much. So Celtics are my number 3.
Interesting, yeah. I do agree that they're not playing with the same amount of energy. Like it feels like they're probably gonna cruise to whatever playoff spot they get to. Like I think they're gonna be the 2 or the 3 seed.
Yeah.
They're gonna cruise to it. I do think there's a case to be made that they're saving it for the playoffs. But yeah, they aren't playing with the same fervor, which is, I think the frustrating part about the NBA is you have 82 games and then these playoffs that go for like months. And that's where I think the case can be made that the NBA season needs to be shorter, because then you get situations not only like this, but Jimmy on the Heat, or honestly even LeBron at times, where it would be like they wait till the playoffs and they turn it on. But it's like, well, you have 82 games of wasted revenue for the league and these teams are not turning it on. So probably it's like I guess adjacent to what you're saying, but I agree. I don't think they're playing with the same energy that they played with last year, but B, especially during the playoffs.
Yeah, so I like him. I don't want anyone to take this as, like, if the Celtics are the finals, I'm not gonna be surprised. Like, but it's just, I can only do what I see this year. And as much as we want to lean on priors, and I think we can to some extent, it also worries me that I'm seeing like a downtick, right? And like, so that's like something I think about as like trends, like they're trending down from what they were, and that just is what gives me some pause. So the top two were tough, and I feel like I will probably pick different than a lot of people, but I think that the top two are pretty clear. In each conference, there's a clear best seed, and that's kind of where this took me. So number two for me is going to be the Thunder. So the Thunder are just, they're just great. like it's just good basketball. Everyone's good. Like, oh my, like SGA is just, he's a savant, and I'm very happy you picked him in the draft. I told you to pick him over Luca. Switch. So
Worked out, yeah.
yeah, so I was like, Luca gets hurt sometimes, and SGA is just super consistent, and that did happen. So, but SGA is he's just really good. I think everything just works. You have Chet back now, which is really important. Hartenstein, I think, is like an unsung hero in a lot of ways. He does the dirty work for you. You have Jalen Williams, he's just a baller. He's just like he's on the precipice of being like a perennial all-star. It's just a really good team, and like when you have like Caruso, like you just have a lot of pieces that I think fit and work together and like work really well, and it's just an exciting team, and I think they have the experience to make it to the finals this year. But again, they're still young, and this is one of the ticks for them for why they're my two, is I think they're a little young, and I'm just worried about, truthfully, it could be biased because I had Chet and he in my fantasy team, and it was painful having him this year, though I'm sure it was more painful for him being injured. But I'm just worried about him getting hurt again. I'm just worried, like, if him, like, I could see a world, because him and Hartenstein, I feel like both get hurt, like, periodically. Like, if they're both gone for, like, a playoff series, like, what does that do to the Thunder? And so when I'm thinking about this list, I'm thinking about, that's another reason why the Nuggets couldn't be higher for me is, like, if Jokic is gone, that team is done, right? The Celtics, I think if one of their big stars is gone, there's still a chance they could do stuff, right? But the Thunder are good enough. Like, God forbid anything happen to SGA, they would still be good. But I worry about their bigs, especially Chet. He's just like, for how tall he is, he's just like so lanky. But I love the Thunder. I've been hot on them the last like couple years, and so like I think SGA. Looking back, I'm sure like the Thunder are laughing about the Paul George trade all the way to the bank. You couldn't have known it at the time, but like, whoa, they made out like bandits.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I even at the time I knew SGA was going to be good. I was very sad when we traded SGA, and I think that's my biggest comment is that he is the right young leader for any team. So I think the Thunder. I mean, the management's amazing. Like they've done a great job and they've set themselves up well. So I agree. I do think that the Thunder are doing really well.
Yeah, so love you, Thunder. Yeah, their management's great. Like they still have so many picks the next few years. Like they're a well-run. It's like this is how you do a rebuild. Is what everything the Thunder did. Like you should put it in a book. So my number one is, and this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who's watching basketball, given everyone else. Drum roll, are the Cleveland Cavs. Maybe the first time ever we've said this without LeBron being on the Cleveland Cavs in history. But like they are so good, and they got better at the trade deadline by getting DeAndre Hunter. Like in my opinion, like Karis LeVert, I think when you have Garland and Mitchell is, I'm sorry Karis, like, but you probably won't be missed. Like George Niang is not, like, again, not a terrible loss. I'm sorry George if you're listening, I do apologize, but I think like the Cavs can play in any way that you need, right? If you need bigs, you have Evan Mobley, who he's taken the step I thought he would take last year, but he's taking it this year, and he's so good, right? And then you have like Jared Allen, who's just, you have these great bigs, but then you have Donovan Mitchell, who like he scored 50 points in a playoff game. There's like a handful of people who can ever say that, and he's really experienced, right? And I think having that experience like point guard, I think puts the Cavs a little bit above the Thunder in that regard. Like, in a playoff series, maybe I prefer Mitchell over SGA. SGA is a savant, right? But during a regular season, I probably prefer SGA to play all those minutes in all those games. But Mitchell, like, just to turn it on. And we saw Garland make, what, a 40-foot, like, three-pointer to win a game just, like, a couple days from this recording. So it's like, he can do it too. And I think you have such a cool model of, like, we have two guards who are awesome and everyone else is freaking big and they will bully you, right? And I just think that's a recipe for success. And I think they're hard to play against unless you have, like, the bigs that, like, a Timberwolves kind of team do. But I don't think the Timberwolves kind of teams this year are going to make it as far as maybe they did last year. And so I think that's another thing for the Cavs is, like, who in the East scares them minus the Celtics? Like, I don't know. Maybe, like I like the Knicks a lot, but this is always my concern with with their coach is how will their bodies handle the playoff minutes when they're already getting 40 minutes per game, right? Like, Thibodeau does not care about rest, which I think can work in winning, but can also lead to, like poor Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart are going to be just bones at the end of the season. So that's my top 5. So any thoughts on the Cavs before we get into your list, Rashi?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the Cavs have been doing really well, and I would agree that they've definitely gotten stronger at the deadline without people realizing it. So I would agree in general that the Cavs are looking good, and I don't know how many people actually realize that outside of, yes, hopefully the people who are watching. Great. So in my list, there will definitely be overlap. That's why I kept my commentary a little short for a couple of these. But I also will throw some honorable mentions out there. One is the Magic, and that's mainly because they got Kelly Oubre Jr., so not only are they doing better skill-wise, but they're doing better fine-wise, too.
We'll have a future episode where we have a fine meter, and I know Kelly Oubre is... Listen, I'm a straight man, but damn. He pretty. He a pretty boy, you know what I mean?
He's a good-looking guy, yeah. When I saw that, I was like, okay, Orlando. So... That's definitely one of them. I wouldn't say the Clippers are in the top 5 or anything like that, but I do think that there are some trades that they had that flew under the radar. And
they made a lot of small good moves.
Exactly. Like Eubanks was a big one. The interesting thing is they got Ben Simmons, and I think this is the first time that a team's gotten Ben Simmons and not gotten roasted for it, because I think it's such a low risk, high reward situation that, like, either he does nothing and it doesn't matter because, like, they gave up nothing for him, they bought him out, or he does well and that's great because, like, would love to see him upgrade Terrence Mann.
Yeah, it's like a strangely perfect fit in that Ben Simmons, I think, loves the high society life where he described himself as a young socialite, back in the day, and everyone roasted him for it. Yeah. So he's in Los Angeles, but he gets the advantage of being, on the Clippers, which are unfortunately not talked about as much as they should be. I say that as a Lakers fan painfully. And then you also have, like, the lower stakes, right? He's not on a $40 million contract, right? He's bought out. So I think that's a really good team to point out. And I felt like you were going to point them out, which is part of the reason why I did it, but they would be an honorable mention for me too.
Awesome. Yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing is on the court too, Ben Simmons fits in pretty well because you have shooters on the court. Like James Harden loves to take the shots. Even like Zubac gets in the paint, he can take a shot. Like Ben Simmons doesn't need to be the guy in the clutch who takes that shot. Honestly, most of the time he doesn't need to be the guy taking the shot at all. I think he can do a good job of like spreading the floor out a bit, and then hopefully he can get the defense up and like help there too. I think Ty Lue has helped revitalize a lot of careers, and I think that's where Ben Simmons can see an upside with the Clippers. And then Patty Mills too, coming off the bench, I think will be helpful. So in general, I think we see. I forgot Bogdan Bogdanovic coming through as well. I know he hasn't been playing super well this season, but I had him on my fantasy team for a bit. He was fine, and again, maybe Ty Lue can work some magic with him, and he can be a good role player off the bench as well. So
Ty Lue's a super underrated coach. Like a lot of people like, oh, LeBron carried him. No, that if you watched like that, he did. LeBron was great, but Ty Lue was also really competent and a good coach.
Very true. And I remember there was our series against the Jazz and then against Phoenix in 2021. That's when finally like Ty Lue, got some of his flowers. But even then, like it went downhill real quick after that. And the thing is, like he had so much there's so much other stuff going on probably in the locker room that Ty Lue didn't have control over, but I think he's done a lot with what he has. The Clippers have been doing quite well this season. Like, again, they're not top 3, but they've been like fluctuating between the 6 and the 4, like for a while. So, I mean, I'd be interested to see where they go, obviously, as a fan, but also just in general. And then the other team that I did want to shout out, I was going to put them in my top 5 too, but I thought I'd mix it up a little bit, is the Nuggets, because I do agree Jokic is doing amazing, and I might, like, my 4 and 5 might not age well compared to the Nuggets, because I do think that the Nuggets have a good shot. You're right. They have a good young star in Christian Braun, but I also agree that they don't have, there's no real consistency with the rest of the team, and I think that's what hurt them last year in the playoffs. Like, I expected the Nuggets to at least make it back to the finals last year, and they didn't even do that. So I would make them an honorable mention, but I wouldn't make them my main 5. But I'm also kind of with Bobby on this. It's very tough. Like, I think the 4 and 5 can be switched out with a bunch of other teams as well. And I, again, could live to maybe regret some of the choices that I make, but I'm going to go for it anyways. So at number 5, I think the Knicks will look really good. I would say the Knicks are number 5 for me. I think that the core, like, Jalen Brunson, what he did in the playoffs last year was insane. Karl Anthony Towns has fit in a lot better than people expected him to, and he's helped a lot in terms of contribution on both ends of the court, I think. And then I also think that Josh Hart flies under the radar a lot. People don't talk about Josh Hart a lot. I think he's done a lot, especially defensively, for the Knicks. So I do think that you have a good squad. I wouldn't expect them necessarily to make it to the finals, but I could see them making it to the Eastern Conference Finals. And I could see some weird situation where they actually end up beating the Celtics, because I know they played the Celtics last year. They took the Celtics farther than the Mavs did, from what I remember.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and so, like, I do think that it's a good matchup. Plus, it's always good. It's good for sports when Boston and New York play each other, in any sport. So it's good for basketball when Boston and New York play each other. But I also think it's good basketball when Boston and New York play each other. So I'd love to see them. I mean, I think the Knicks can do well, but I do agree they're going to be tired. They've been playing more than, for example, the Celtics have, like their starters. And so I could see some problems there. I also know OG's coming back, and so, or has come back, and so that will help as well. But I know you commented on the Knicks a little bit. Is there any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to add, like, Josh Hart is just like one of my favorite players in the NBA. Both personality and just like the way he plays the game is like, I will be whatever jigsaw puzzle piece you need me to be today, and I love it. And Jalen Brunson, that guy is just a dog. He's just so good at basketball. But I'm with you. I thought, like, again, the Knicks were an honorable mention for me. I'm just always trepidatious with a Thibodeau team in the playoffs, and that's maybe, again, I think my list, I was more thinking playoff series, but again, I think if you tell me the Knicks made it to the finals, I wouldn't, like, from the East, like, they would be my 3rd most likely team, and, like, they're probably, like 7 or something like that, or 6. So I'm not too far off from you in how I project
exactly.
them.
And then I will mention they traded for DeLon Wright, who is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, and I think we don't talk about it very much, but that's going to help their defense a lot as well.
Sure.
So, again, defense can get you far in the playoffs. Number 4, this is a very risky choice, but I had to make it. I actually think the Warriors look very good.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, and here's kind of my case for the Warriors, and this is why they beat out teams like the Nuggets, the Knicks, and like the Spurs, for example, who are like a younger team, or the Rockets, who are a younger team. It's because I think playoff Jimmy is dangerous, and I don't think that he's aged out of that yet. Like, he always kind of cruises through the regular season, would just turn it on in the playoffs. And if we compare playoff Jimmy with like any amount of Steph Curry, like, I actually think that's quite dangerous. And what I've seen with the Warriors in the playoffs is the way that they pull ahead is obviously all those Steph threes. And I think if you can get like Jimmy to pour in the effort that he has poured in the past, paired with Curry, like pouring in any ounce of effort that he can, plus like some of the role players stepping up. I mean, they lost a lot of depth. I mean, trading away like Wiggins, for example, was a big blow for them. But I do think that they have 2 players who have carried the team on their backs before, and like, when the Warriors beat the Celtics in 2022, it wasn't like, I mean, obviously Klay Thompson and Draymond Green and like the rest of the team helped out, but like Curry did a lot of the heavy lifting there. And when the Heat took the Nuggets pretty far in the finals the next year, like, I do think that Jimmy took a lot of that. So obviously, like 10 years ago, this would have been a lot better, but even 5 years ago, it would have been a lot better. But like, I do think that they look good, and I think Steve Kerr is an amazing coach, and I think if anybody can do it, it's him. So I don't expect them to like. Well, actually, I wouldn't be surprised if they made it to the finals. I know other people probably would be, but like so that first game with Jimmy was insane, and I can see Steph like, that energy can carry them far. So I'd say the Warriors would be my number 4.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good pick, and I had thought about it. Like, they are an interesting pick. I just worried about their depth. I think for me, that's like kind of what took away. Because I agree that Jimmy Butler, he is definitely downtrended the last few years, and I don't think he looked particularly good in the few games he did play this year for the Heat. But again, was he quiet quitting? I don't know. Yeah, so that's the hard part with Jimmy. And so like, if Jimmy's bought in, then I think like this like. I am also bought in. It's just, Butler's on his 5th team, and he's too good to have been on this many teams. There's clearly personality conflicts. I wonder if having someone as strong-willed as Draymond next to Jimmy, if could be a really good thing for Jimmy, someone who's willing to actually talk at his level, because I think Jimmy Butler thinks he's the alpha in every situation that he's in, which I don't mind a basketball player thinking that on the court, right? Like that, right. I'm the dude, right? But I think that could be hard with interpersonal relationships to always have that energy. But I think if Draymond and him, they can channel that hater energy into doing what they do best on the court, then I think it's totally fine. And Steph, Steph is just a virtuoso. I am so happy to be watching basketball the time he's played. Like, I'm very grateful for that. So they aren't for me. I'm just worried about long term. I'm worried any one of them gets hurt. I just have so many worries and concerns. And I mean, you're right. It's a risky pick, but it's one of those lotto picks that could work, right? I absolutely think that they could go far. I just think there's so much that has to go right. But, of teams to make it to the finals, it's weird. I feel like they want to be like higher for me than some West teams to make the conference finals, but they might be higher than me to make it to the finals than some other teams, just given their experience.
Yeah, and I actually think they're one of the teams that if they make it to the finals, I would expect them to put on a bigger fight, if not like completely win it, surprising everyone like against any team in the East. Like I actually think that they are the one team in the West that if they make it there, like they're very scary, because if they've made it that far, there's something that's clicking, and like that. I think it's over at that point. So I agree with that. I also think Draymond Green, I've seen a lot of this Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, like potential tension or whatever. But I do think that there was a lot of talk about Kevin Durant and Draymond Green having tension when he came to the Warriors. And I do think that the front office does a good job. Now, they do have a different GM now than they did back then, but the front office does do a good job of like talking Green down, and they're pretty used to it at this point. So I do think that's one big thing. But I also agree the injuries are huge. Jimmy Butler was injured last year during the playoffs, so I'm not convinced that he is going to stay healthy. But if he does, yes, I think that it's a big if, but they can be dangerous. At number 3, I would put the Thunder. And number 2 and number 3 are going to be kind of interchangeable, or a little bit like not interchangeable. Sorry, I feel like they're kind of a tie, but I do think the reason why I put the Thunder at number 3 is still the youth. Like I think getting Alex Caruso helps in a lot of ways, but one of the biggest ways is he's a veteran. Like he's been around the block a bit, and even though he's like Chris Paul or Steph Curry in terms of the success that I won't even say that, like the status that he has, I do think that he will serve as like a good mentor for a lot of these players. So I think Alex Caruso is a good get for many reasons. I think in general, I mean, you've listed a lot of the reasons why the Thunder are really good. Their management's insane. SGA's like, yeah, I'm very happy I picked him up. He's having a year, and there's been weeks in fantasy where SGA alone has carried my team. And so I will say like SGA is amazing. I knew when we traded Paul George for SGA, or when we traded SGA for Paul George, I wish it was the other way around. I thought it was a mistake at that point. Like I think if Kawhi had come to the Clippers as the Clippers were in 2019, we would have won the championship, because SGA like the next year started to turn it on, and then we already had good team chemistry. Like we beat the Warriors 30 down when the Warriors still had KD and KD and Klay Thompson. And so I'm still convinced that we had a better shot at the championship keeping that team intact and adding Kawhi than trading for Paul George, but that's one other thing.
Yeah, as like a quick little aside, it's so interesting because of the is that trade, because so everyone thought Kawhi might go to the Lakers. That was the rumor, right? And so it's like like I think to contextualize for the Clippers and making them also not look as bad in that trade, as much as it was a trade for Paul George, it was a trade to get both Paul George and Kawhi. It seems like, right? And so I think for people who weren't paying attention, as Lakers fan, I was very closely shaking my fist at Kawhi, you snake, how dare you? I wasn't actually mad at him. It was just funny watching all Lakers fans thinking he was coming. But it's interesting how I wonder if that one decision hurt both of the LA franchises, right? Because the Lakers were planning so much of how they're approaching everything that offseason with Kawhi in mind, right? And then the Clippers had to give up a lot to convince Kawhi to get there, and then you lose SGA. So I wonder if both those teams were negatively affected. Again, Kawhi's a dog. I love him, but it's just really interesting. It's a great what if sort of question or scenario.
And I also think, I wonder where SGA would be now staying on the Clippers, because, a big part of the Thunder's success is obviously SGA, but then the rest of the young core, like Chet. And so I would wonder if, obviously, maybe Terrence Mann would have seen, a different outcome if SGA had stuck around. Maybe he would have been a good number two to SGA. I don't know. But, yeah, I do think that there's a bit of, would SGA have seen the success that I think he will be seeing on the Thunder with the Clippers? And I don't know. But yeah, so I think the Thunder would be number 3 for me. Number 2 are the Cavaliers. And the reason why I put the Cavaliers above the Thunder is because of Donovan Mitchell. I think though SGA is amazing, and clear MVP right now, if the season ended right now, SGA would get an MVP. I think Jokic will get it, but I think that right now SGA deserves it. But Donovan Mitchell is more seasoned than SGA. I think that he'll have a better time in the playoffs because he has more experience than SGA. And he's done a lot in the playoffs pre-Cavaliers that people don't talk about. I also think that the Cavaliers are really flying under the radar right now. I mean, they've lost 10 games. That's insane in February, having lost 10 games. They have, I think, the best offense in the NBA or offensive rating ever in the NBA or something like that right now. They're breaking the Celtics record from last year. They're doing really well. Adding Hunter, you're right, is huge. I think that's a huge pickup for them that flew under the radar. It's not a flashy trade, but it's a good trade for sure. And it addresses, I think, one of their bigger weaknesses in terms of defense. And so I'm not sure if you said that or not, but if I'm repeating it, sorry.
I forgot to mention that I didn't mention the trade specifically for defense, but yeah, I think that's a good addition. I was you get another big who can play defense. Should have been that.
Exactly. And I think you're right. In general, players are shaping up to be stronger than we probably would have expected them to be. I think this trade's going to help them a lot. And honestly, I'm happy to see the Cavs doing well, because I feel when LeBron left, it was the next 30 years are going to be horrible for you. But to see them so quickly kind of bouncing back, and with a player like Donovan Mitchell, who I think also has something to prove. People often forget that, but he's been overlooked for a long time. He's finally getting some of the attention he deserves, but even then, not enough. He's amazing. So I think the Cavs are number 2, but again, I could see the top 3 in general being kind of flipped around, much like you did it. My number 1 is the Celtics.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, totally fair. I mean, if you had put the Lakers at number 1, I'd been of course. But
yeah, no, I'm not that bad. I'm not that yellow and gold pilled. I promise, or gold and purple pilled.
Yeah. Right. So I'm a big fan of the Celtics in general. I mean, my first half of my childhood was in Vermont, so I've always been somewhat of a Celtics fan. But even beyond that, Jaylen Brown went to Cal, so another reason to be a little biased toward the Celtics. But even taking bias out, I think that the Celtics just got Kelly Olynyk, who I know is older, but that's how you pronounce his last name, right?
Yes.
And he's a little bit older, but he does add, he's a good backup big for Kristaps. And I think Porzingis' health is going to be a big what if, but so far it's been good. So knock on wood, it continues. And I think that the Celtics are doing what a lot of teams do once they win the championship, which is turn it off during the regular season and turn it on during the playoffs. Now the playoffs haven't started yet, so I'm not sure, but to me, they didn't make, the only trade, they made 1 or 2 other trades at the trade deadline. Nothing huge, but I don't think they needed anything huge. Jason Tatum's playing well, as Jason Tatum should play. I think Jaylen Brown, and the reason I have this trust in him is because I think that he is one of, if not the most intelligent NBA player. So I think he probably has some kind of master plan that we all don't understand or know about, because he's probably smarter than everyone else in the world. But he is I think he will turn it on when the time comes. Again, hopefully he stays healthy, but I think they have good people around him. I have Holiday on my team, and he keeps like going in and out in terms of like injury. I think he's doing some load management, honestly. But like he's amazing, also very underrated. So I think they have a lot of pieces. I've actually been surprised by how much people haven't talked about the Celtics this season. Like they have in terms of they won the championship, they're doing well, but there hasn't been too much. Like I think if other teams, like a team, not just the Lakers, but any team that LeBron was on, was doing this like this, or like the Warriors were doing as well as the Celtics post winning a chip. Like again, the energy is not the same, but I don't think we're talking about the Celtics as much as I would expect, especially because they are like a bigger market team, and. So maybe it's because we're not in the Northeast. Maybe it's because we live in LA. But yeah, I've been pretty surprised. I would love to see the Celtics do well. And again, I want Jaylen Brown to win another championship.
Yeah. I have no issue with the Celtics pick. I think I explained my reservations. I'm just worried since what I've seen in regular season isn't as clean as I thought they could be, but they're still a great team. They're if I had to bet any team to make it to their conference finals, even though they're my third, they might be my highest, right? It's just like I don't see them losing until the conference finals unless I don't think you're going to... I think with this Celtics squad now, you're never going to have like the Heat Celtics situation a few years ago where they get upset. Like I think it's just going to be a team that's just as good as them, and in this situation it'd have to be the Cavs or some other, like the Knicks, just like playing god tier ball and to beat them. But the Celtics are good, and I think you are right that they aren't being talked about as much as they probably should be with how good they are. I do think people, like sports fans, are so funny because the second a team wins a championship, we're bored of them. Like we're like, we want the under. I remember just 5 years ago when everyone wanted Mahomes to win the championship, and yesterday everyone hated him, and myself included. And it's just like, it's funny how fast and short our memories are, and I think the Celtics could be suffering from that. I also don't think the Celtics mind that. I think none of them are attention hogs, which is probably part of the reason they have such a successful culture and team is that like Tatum is really good at not listening to all the noise that gets thrown at him. I think it's fun to like diss on Tatum, but at the end of the day, like he gets too much hate for how good of a player he is. But I'm glad we both see the Cavs as like really good. They're your two, they're my one. Celtics. So I think like if we math it out, we basically would have a tie for the top three, which might be apropos for how we feel about the top three.
Exactly, yeah. And I do think there's teams that might surprise us, like the Bucks might come out and surprise us. Honestly, I didn't even think about the Bucks until you just said something that made me think about, I think it was a championship and like underdog thing. But like maybe the Bucks come out and surprise us. I don't know. So like I think the Bucks are one of the few teams in the East that could come out and surprise us and beat the Celtics. Yeah. That's where it was. And then there could be like a weird situation where like Tyrese Haliburton like goes off and the Pacers do really well like they did last year. Yeah. So I think there's like interesting situations like that, or Tyrese Maxey goes off. Like I would be interested to see. I would love to see the Sixers do better than we'd expect because I feel bad for them. But I think that there's a lot of teams that, and that's what I think you mentioned before the show. Like honestly, 4 to 12 almost is like there are teams that could jump up and down within like minutes. Honestly.
Yeah.